Business is now interrupted for the presentation of inaugural speeches, and it gives me great pleasure to call the member for Heffron.
Mr Acting Speaker, it is an honour and a privilege to rise as a member of this House, and in so doing I recognise the traditional owners of this land and pay my respects to their elders past and present. I am particularly proud to have been elected by the people of Heffron. My electorate covers an area of Sydney where I have lived almost my entire life. In more than 3 decades of representing the people of the city of Botany Bay as mayor, I never look backwards. I never look backwards. To me, looking backwards has no point other than to learn. As Santiago said, those who cannot learn from history are bound to repeat it. We on this side of the House know the past all too well. The people of New South Wales passed their judgment, and that's why we sit on this side of the chamber. New governments always begin their term by spending time throwing blame. Now it has reached an age, in my view, Mr Acting Speaker, where that time has passed. There are huge issues to be addressed, and that's what government should be about. Looking to the future, planning for the future, acting for the future. My input into this House, to the debates I hope, will be looking ahead. In planning, in law reform, in transport, in infrastructure, in the environment, in housing, and the many other areas where there is much to be done. The years ahead, that's where my focus will be. I am the 4th member of Heffron since it was created in 1973. Named after the late Bob Heffron, former Premier and member for Botany, then named Maroubra. Heffron was first represented by the Honourable Laurie Brereton, followed by the Honourable Deirdre Gruzovan, and followed in 2003 by my predecessor, former Premier, the Honourable Christina Keneally, until her retirement some 2 months ago. I take the opportunity to pay tribute to the Honourable Christina Keneally for her outstanding service, not just to the people of Heffron, but also to the people of New South Wales. I wish her well in her future and her future endeavours, and thank her on behalf of the people of Heffron. Mr Acting Speaker, I am the eldest child of Ernest and Edith Hoenig. My late father, born in Vienna in 1921, my late mother, born in Prostějov in Czechoslovakia in 1926. My mother was a Holocaust survivor. The Holocaust was never spoken about in our home, as was the case with many survivors. It was not until after her death, when I saw the video of her Shoah interview and did a search on the Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum in Jerusalem, that gave me some insight into her lifetime. On the 30th of June 1942, at the age of 16, she was deported along with her mother Ida and father Rudolph by the most primitive and soul-destroying transport, a cattle wagon. It was train DA 404 to Theresienstadt, then to Rasika, Estonia, where her parents were, as she described, shot naked into a trench with thousands of others. My mother survived because she was a strong young girl fit to work. When she was liberated from the concentration camp, she discovered 2 generations of her extended family had been exterminated. Prior to the Anschluss, my father and his twin brother Walter had been sent by their father from Vienna, where they were amongst some 1,800 Jewish refugees bound for Palestine. But the British would not accept the Jews escaping the Nazis, and deportation orders were issued. They were loaded onto the ship Patria at Haifa. The Zionist organisation Haganah, seeking to disable the ship to stop the deportation of the Jewish refugees, caused an explosion and the ship sank in the middle of Haifa harbour. My father survived where hundreds didn't, swimming to shore with a broken arm and carrying a very small child. My mother and father met after the war and settled briefly in Czechoslovakia. Their stay was cut short when the communists took over in 1948. They snuck out of the country, eventually coming by boat to Australia. Mr. Acting Speaker, no doubt in modern political discourse, I am the child of boat people, and I'm pleased that the political leaders of 1948 were not calling to stop the boats. Mr. Speaker, on arrival in Australia in 1948, my parents were initially accommodated in refugee huts erected in what is now known as Heffron Park, Maroubra. Their first home was a block of flats at Maroubra Beach, which still stands today. That block of flats was the home to 8 families who survived the Holocaust. Such was the social justice spirit in that humble block of flats that 3 of the children became public defenders for the state of New South Wales. My association with my area was entrenched when my parents bought their family home in King Street, East Lakes, when I was 5 years of age. They lived there for the rest of their lives. Since then, I really didn't live more than about a kilometre or so from my family home. I went to public schools, firstly at East Lakes and then at Daceyville, and then on to J.J. Carl Memorial High School, named after another local former Premier. The idea of a university education was beyond the financial resources of my parents, and at the age of 19, after working in box and tile factories, I gained employment which was then called the Petty Sessions branch of the Attorney General and Justice Department. Following the election, Mr. Acting Speaker, of the Whitlam government, university and higher education was made available to all students, and with no fees to pay, I was able to enrol in the Solicitors Admission Board, which qualified me to practice at law. In those days, Mr. Acting Speaker, the Petty Sessions branch transferred its personnel to country towns, where I saw service in Wagga, Lockhart and Bathurst. Those postings gave me a real insight into the difficulties that people face in regional New South Wales, especially in terms of lack of government services. I then became an article clerk and then a solicitor in the Public Solicitor's Office, where I practiced in litigation and then in criminal law. In 1987, I was, Mr. Acting Speaker, appointed a public defender for the state of New South Wales. That was my dream job. As a young boy, I often imagined myself standing in front of a jury advocating the innocence of my client. Being a public defender fulfilled that ambition. My great passion was, and still is, the criminal law. The criminal law really gave me an opportunity to make a difference. The difference wasn't necessarily made when appearing in high-profile cases, but in rural and regional New South Wales. There one can go quietly amongst one's profession, fighting against oppression, standing up for people who have never had a chance in life, and persuading the courts to give the best the law can, reasonable and fair decisions. Mr. Acting Speaker, being able to convince a court, in accordance with the law, to release young offenders, particularly Aboriginal offenders, and giving them a chance in life, has given me about the greatest sense of achievement I could have had. Mr. Acting Speaker, my election to this House meant resigning the office of Public Defender and leaving a floor of talented and dedicated, hard-working barristers. This perhaps was the hardest thing I ever had to do. I became involved in the Labor Party in 1975, as many young people did when I was living in Wagga. Particularly law students were involved, and we were spurred on by the sacking of the Whitlam government. Whilst my fervour was bound in ridding the country of Malcolm Fraser, when I transferred back to my family home and joined my local Labor Party branch, I discovered that the main focus of the local Labor Party branch was local government. I joined my first community protest when the council attempted to sack its garbage staff, and award the garbage collection contract to its deputy mayor. We won that one. But following that victory, there was an expectation in the Labor Party branches that I would be a candidate in the 1980 local government elections. I heeded the call, and in September 1980, I was elected to the then Municipal Council when I was elected Deputy Mayor at the age of 27. The following year, I was elected by my fellow councillors as Mayor. In 1983, I was elected as Mayor by popular vote, a position I was re-elected to at every election, serving just shy of 4 days of 31 years. Whilst being Mayor was never my profession, it did become integral in my life and the driver to be involved in change. Mr Acting Speaker, when I was a young boy, when people knew I came from Botany or Mascot when I represented my local schools, they would look down their nose at me. The place I lived was the home of the largest concentration of petrochemical industries in the Southern Hemisphere. It had aircraft taking off over the top. It was the home to stinking tanneries and polluting industries. Mr Acting Speaker, we have always been a proud people in our city, but we were not going to be looked down upon. I was determined with my council colleagues to give our residents a quality of life that they could be justly proud of, and a city that would be the envy of others. I was determined to transform our dirty suburbs into a garden city. We had some success, and now the city of Botany Bay has a new lease of life with families moving in. It has become a desirable place in which to live. Mr Acting Speaker, I leave the office of Mayor of the City of Botany Bay as at 2 p.m. this afternoon with no regrets. It is in the safe hands of people, Mr Acting Speaker, whom I have enormous respect. Mr Acting Speaker, I seek an extension of time.
The question is that the member's time be extended. All of that opinion, please say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Please proceed.
The Council of the City of Botany Bay has been able to renew itself with its elected representatives receiving an overwhelming endorsement to continue to make it a great place to live. That the City of Botany Bay became a great place to live involved proper planning. As a member of this House, I will contribute with all the intellectual rigour that I can in relation to the overhaul of the planning system in this state. Mr Acting Speaker, the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act of 1979 was perhaps the finest piece of environmental planning legislation enacted in Australia. Any ineffectiveness or actions that have brought it into disrepute are as a result of the constant meddling with this legislation, which I submit with the greatest respect has been occasioned by an almost total lack of understanding of what the legislation was designed to achieve. Planning decisions are required to be made by elected representatives, not bureaucrats. Decisions on developments that may impact upon a city or a neighbourhood for decades should only be taken by local experts, and the local experts are representatives of the people. These experts may be councillors, or at times they may be ministers responsible to Parliament. Reform which encapsulates this principle should be the essential reform of planning legislation. Mr Acting Speaker, genuine reform is also needed in the criminal justice system. But criminal justice reform must not simply appeal to the lowest common denominator or to adhere to community fears and prejudices. There is not a citizen who does not share the wish for a crime-free society. However, more needs to be done by government to support the very social infrastructure or lack of social infrastructure that is the source of most crime. As a public defender and for several years as an acting Crown prosecutor, I have, Mr Acting Speaker, witnessed the worst of crimes. The outcomes always involve a loss of liberty, which is the right punishment. But, Mr Acting Speaker, loss of liberty does not mean loss of dignity. And that's what currently exists in the current corrective services system, and has for many years. Mr Acting Speaker, rehabilitation is not just for the benefit of those who are incarcerated, it is also for the benefit of our society. When these reforms are debated, we should be cautious with that legislation and take advantage of the input from the Law Reform Commission, Bar Association, Law Society, Crown prosecutors, public defenders and members of the judiciary. Allied with that reform is the role of police. 2 years, Mr Acting Speaker, as an acting Crown prosecutor gave me a unique insight into the workings of the New South Wales Police Force and the investigation of serious crime. I was deeply impressed by the talent and the dedication of a number of detectives who investigated and gave evidence in trials that I prosecuted. Murderers were convicted because of the individual work of local detectives, men and women who were then, as they are now, impacted by budget restrictions imposed by a bureaucracy more concerned about bean counting than results. The present oversight of police has led to a situation where there are so many bodies watching over the men and women who are the first responders in crime that often their ability to respond is hamstrung. This should not be the reality. And Mr Acting Speaker, we should never equate police numbers to police effectiveness. Effectiveness costs money. Money for the latest surveillance technology, money for the latest and faster forensic examinations. But an effective and resourced police force is the greatest protection for our community. On my election on the 25th of August 2012, I said, and I restate for the benefit of the House, that there are a number of issues that concern the electors of Heffron. Whether it's gridlock in the road system, the inefficiencies of public transport, the quality of maintenance in public housing, the quality of law enforcement, cost of living, available of car parking, all these issues can be grouped together as quality of life and the need to improve it. And that's where people are coming from. I said then and I say again that people are looking to their elected representatives to care and to care about their quality of life. People do not believe that politicians have a magic wand. People don't, as a prerequisite, even want to agree with the government of the day. Mr Acting Speaker, what they want is leadership. They want to be inspired. They want a genuine hope for the future. And I see my role in this place as working towards these aims and aspirations. The great honour of being a member of this House for me has only occurred through the contribution of many people. To the people of Heffron, I say thank you for entrusting me as your representative. I will do my very best and not let you down. To the people of the City of Botany Bay who overwhelmingly supported me for 31 years, I thank you sincerely for your trust and your warmth. To my fellow councillors on the City of Botany Bay, both past and present, I thank you for your warm and generous support and friendship over many years. They are just as much a part of this success as I am. Particularly to the Deputy Mayor, my good friend George Glanatsis, who has been more than a deputy. He has been a true friend and a confidant, and for that I thank him from the bottom of my heart. To the Labor Party branch members throughout the electorate of Heffron, your support was generous and warm when I was selected as a Labor Party candidate, and I'm extremely grateful. To the much maligned ALP officials who impressed me with their professionalism and energy, particularly Caleb Manane, I thank you sincerely. As I thank the young Labor team who never stops. The Labor Party's future is bright with these talented young people, and I thank them sincerely. To my parliamentary colleagues who gave so much of their time supporting me in the by-election, I thank you. I particularly want to thank the Honourable Bob Carr, Foreign Minister and former Premier of New South Wales, because if it wasn't for him, I would have never had the opportunity to be a member of this House. To my late parents who went through so much in their life, and although they always wished I was never involved in politics, I know that they would be proud of their son today. To the staff of the City of Botany Bay who served for many years with such dedication, I thank you. To my dear friend Peter Fitzgerald, who served as Director of Personnel then as General Manager for much of the time I had the honour to be the city's Mayor. I thank him for his professionalism and his wise counsel and his friendship. I will be forever grateful. To the genius of Brian Dale, who for 15 years has been an inspiration in so much of what I've done, I say thank you for your friendship, your support, your guidance, and never being afraid to tell me like it is. Last but certainly not least, to my wife and children. Those who serve in politics, when they leave, they often say they wish to spend more time with their families. Those expressions, Mr Acting Speaker, are often viewed with cynicism. As a mayor, it was your second job, after your real job, and then there was your family. My eldest son, now 22, brought this home to me when he was 9. He asked me if I was going to his school speech day, adding, "Dad, how come you've gone to everybody else's speech day and you've never been to mine?" To my children, Ben and Matthew, thank you for lending your father to the people of the city of Botany Bay for the term of your entire life. Just when you thought you might see more of me, I've taken on another role. But I've always been there for you when it was important, and I always will be. To my wife, Christine, who has supported me so completely and professionally and personally and put up with me for almost 30 years, I thank you. I will discharge my duties as a member of this House to the best of my ability. It is often not understood by those who seek to judge members of Parliament that we are not perfect. We are, after all, human beings, subject to the same human failings and shortcomings as the rest of the community. Mr Acting Speaker, if it were otherwise, how could a Member of Parliament really understand or relate to his or her community? If anyone expects perfection in any Member of Parliament, then they will be disappointed. Being human, there are times when one is going to be wrong or make errors of judgment. All we can hope for is that when we err, it happens less than when we don't. Mr Acting Speaker, it is an honour and a privilege to be a member of this House.
I join with all honourable members in congratulating the new member for Heffron and welcome him to the Legislative Assembly of New South Wales and the 55th Parliament.
Crusty. There you go, mate. There you go. Oh, yeah, mate. I'll give you some tips if you like. Yeah. John, is it MAP? What is it? Might be private members. Gareth, is it private members? MPI. What are we doing tonight?